Hunters of Reddit, what did you see out there that made you not want to go back into the woods? My father and I were following a trail for a while, so we decided to take a break and catch our breaths. I sat on a log off the trail and my dad stood on the edge of the trail waiting for me to get up. I hear some movement and scan around and I see a man, dressed casually, walking quickly down the trail with a Glock in his hand. He is not really following the trail, he is just walking toward my dad with haste. Before he comes up to my dad, he asks if he's seen anything pretty normal. I keep an eye on him because I don't believe he was there to hunt. I think he was there to make sure my dad hadn't seen anything he wasn't supposed to. He wasn't dressed like a hunter, he didn't walk like a hunter, and it was deer season and he decided he would take his Glock out to get a deer. I wasn't buying, so I put around in the chamber and watched them talk. He seemed to be confident until my dad mentioned that he was here with me and gestured in my direction. I nodded and made a half-assed wave. And he seemed to lose interest in us and ended the conversation shortly after and turned around and walked back the way he came, just about as fast as he walked up to us. It worried us a bit, but we continued on. We haven't been back to that area in a while. My dad told me that there have been drug busts near that area in the past. This isn't a supernatural tale, just an experience that made me not want to go back to that area. A long time ago my grandparents bought a small cabin in the woods in Pennsylvania. My dad, uncle, and aunt are all small children. My father told me this story. They're all sitting around outside with a small fire going when they hear branches breaking and footsteps coming from the darkness. They think it's a black bear because it's close, but they can't see it. It seems to be going straight for my uncle, the littlest of the children. He starts panicking while everyone tells him not to move. Now this big black beast is within arm's reach of him and he's shaking like a leaf with his eyes closed. All of a sudden it opens its jaws and starts licking his face. Turns out that the next property over is owned by a couple who raise Newfoundland dogs and one got out. I've got one good one. I have a hunting spot that I frequent. Not crazy far off the grid or anything like that, terrain is a pain in the ass, but it's a pretty hidden spot that is close to my house. Anyway, I hunt a lot of small game there and see a ton of mule deer anytime I go out. One morning I get there about 5:30 am, and have some time to kill before I start my hike in. I have an odd feeling in the parking lot, but just chalk it up to too much coffee on an empty stomach giving me anxiety. So, I decide to start hiking in, and about 300 yards into my hike I notice this pile of downed trees / branches / general debris that I hadn't seen before. It was my first time hunting this particular place this particular season, so I figure some folks came out and did some fire mitigation work. I don't pay too much attention to it until I notice there's an odd amount of movement coming from it. Pretty small movements, but it sticks out when a brush pile is wiggling on a still day. It was also about 5:45 am, and the wilderness just sort of has this stillness to it at that time that any movement is noticeable. So, I stop and start examining the pile to figure out what's going on. I figure there's a rabbit in there, maybe some squirrels. I figure I've hit the jackpot and I'm definitely about to bag something. I start deciding the best way to flush whatever is going on in there and still have my shotgun up in time to take a good shot. I realize I'm standing by a decent-sized branch, and my best move is to just stomp on the branch. If all goes according to plan, everything will freeze, then whatever is in there will dart out. I try to figure out where the rabbit will come out of, get ready, and bam, I stomp on the branch and snap it in half. The pile goes still, and that stillness and quiet is back. Then, a mountain lion, with a bloody nose and mouth, pops up out of the pile. At this point, I'm about 10 yards from the pile. I have my shotgun, but really don't want to shoot the lion. I also don't want to fire a shot off in the air to scare it, because all in all this was a pretty cool experience that very few people get to have. It froze and was looking at me very quizzically. Then, in one quick motion it hopped out of the brush pile, ran uphill, got about 40 yards from me, and disappeared into the trees. I've never seen something cover 40 yards uphill in such a fast, graceful way. One of the cooler things I've ever gotten to experience. I went to check out the brush pile when it left, and sure enough it was feasting on a mule deer. Still my favorite out in the woods story I ever tell. I work in the woods for a living and I've seen a fair amount of odd things. Carvings in trees, old beat-up cars, random weird trash scattered through the woods, and a fair amount of animal carcasses. I've had instances where I've gotten spooked. Stuff like jumping big critters is always quite jolting, but I can recall one rather butt-puckering experience. I was working with a few other people at the time, spaced out of sight but not out of earshot. I crossed over a little ridge at least 2 miles from the closest road, in the middle of the woods, and I saw what looked like a full skeleton of a cow tied together with twigs and a little bit of twine. Whoever made it had fashioned it to be sitting on a log. They left a very neat pile of bones in front of the thing, and nothing anywhere else. I saw it and about fainted. Definitely really fucking odd considering how far we were off the road, and how thick and steep it was. I ended up getting the folks I was with to come check it out, really just for shits and giggles. I took note of it and we moved on to the next plots. I have a picture, but I'm new to this whole Reddit thing so I'll try to figure out how to upload it. Edit, picture. There is a place in Kingston, Idaho or the other side of Fern and Saddle depending on which way you go to get there. I call it the Snake Pit, and no I don't mean the restaurant. I still visit the area now once in a while and camp there. Anyways, next to where I camp in the trees is a basin, and it has a bunch of old 1920s 1930s rotted cars in it, overgrown by bushes and trees but sunlight falls on the cars. First time I camped out there I walked into those woods and the leaves all started to move. The snakes were running from me while they were sunbathing on the cars. Fucking creeped me out. I don't go in there for wood anymore and I don't see the snakes leave that spot so I just let them be. When I was a kid, a poacher must have thought I was a deer or something and shot around at me. It impacted on the tree above my head. I immediately fired 3 shots as fast as I could, not at the shooter but in the air. In my hunting group, immediate 3 shots means help basically. My dad and our hunting club immediately came out to find out what the fuck happened by honking the horns of their trucks letting me know they were coming. I basically laid on the ground until I could tell they were near the dirt road. Told them what happened and guessed it was probably a road poacher trying to get a deer as it came from the same road. They didn't see him. It was private property and we were always very aware of who was at what location and who was hunting where. Nobody was supposed to be in the part I was at. Scared the shit out of me. This was mid-90s. Reason why I don't like hunting on public property is cause of that and I don't know the people out there. Not a hunter, but a fly fisherman who spends every weekend out hiking remote rivers and streams in search of brown trout. I live in Montreal. My normal routine is to drive down to a river that starts in upstate NY, fish a couple kilometers of the river where no one really lives or goes. Then head cross the border and head back down to the river on the Canadian side. So I'm out there on morning by myself. I had been out there over 100 times so it wasn't new territory by any means. That said, I was getting close to the area where other anglers had warned me about angry landowners and threats from dudes with shotguns so I was pretty alert. I come down to the section of river there it kinda splits, around a little island, 50'x100 kinda island, before it reconnects and the Who River veers off to the left. Most days I stay left of the island, there are few holes. This day I went right, so my view up the river was obscured until I came around the corner of the island. I get to the point, look up, and about 250 feet in front of me I'm standing there looking at a beige golden animal that's crossing the river. First thought, someone's dog. No homes. Too remote of an area. I'm standing there looking at this thing crossing the river, and the things are just racing through my head because what I'm looking at doesn't make sense for where I'm standing. This thing still hasn't seen me, it's just gingerly making its way through about 1 to 2 of water trying to cross across at a determined walk. That's when I notice the tail. I know a lot of dogs, but I've never seen a tail like Dash. Hair on the back of my neck goes up. Fucking shit, I'm looking at a mountain lion, in upstate NY about a kilometer from the Canadian border. I take a step back behind the tree. I stood there for another few seconds watching this thing cross. When it got to the other side it bound up a washout bank up about 20 in a couple bounds. There was no doubt about what I saw. I decide I've gone far enough for the day, start making my way back to the truck which, with the way the river bends, is pretty much in the same direction the cat was headed. Ah fuck me. Get back in the truck, make my way home and contact NY Fish and Game. I provided some data, they say sure we'll look into it. Most buddies who I fish with out there think I'm nuts, obviously. About a month later my parents send me a local news clip. Couple years later I come across this article, literally that area. So needless to say, I feel a little less crazy. My fellow anglers and myself exercise a little more caution in the area. Camping alone in the middle of Missouri the night before turkey hunting. The place I found was a fairly well-used campsite but no one was there. About to go to sleep when I hear a truck come up. I find a reason to come out, use the restroom, so I can get a look and maybe even ask for some good places to spot turkey. It's a dude and his girlfriend drinking beers and going for a ride. They are super nice but they mentioned after our chat and before leaving, watch yourself out here. Lots of meth heads and they won't stop for birdshot. Want a slug? I probably have a few in my toolkit. I did not sleep at all that night. I'm not a hunter, but I do a lot of hiking and mountain biking in the woods. Nothing has ever made me not want to go back, but there has been some weird shit. First, there's just a lot of weird stuff in the woods. Teepees, altars, lean-tos, shrines, etc. Some of it's pretty creepy, but I think most of it is just built by bored people who are trying to make something creepy, so that makes it a bit less scary. Among the strangest of these things that I've seen are a large clearing of trees with all but one entrance blocked off by webs of red strings and a giant stone pentagram stretched across the clearing, 30 feet diameter, a wooden tunnel leading to a small room containing defaced religious icons, Buddha statues, crucifixes, Stars of David, etc., and dozens/hundreds of creepy Polaroid pictures hanging from the ceiling. Ones I remember include a close-up face shot of a girl sleeping, a dude brushing his teeth taken from outside of the window, and a photo booth strip of two girls where one of their faces are crossed out and "I'm glad you're dead" written with one word on each picture, and a number of weird little shrines with creepy scriptures printed or scrawled into them. But what's a lot scarier to me is stuff that isn't meant to be creepy like the aforementioned things hopefully are. I once heard a distant panicked scream followed by a crashing/thudding sound. I couldn't tell from which direction it came from and I didn't hear anything else, so I have no idea what it was. I think the creepiest thing I've experienced was one time while walking home from school through the woods. I heard people talking in the distance, and I couldn't hear what they were saying but they seemed to be arguing. They were quiet for a minute, and then I heard them again, really close now. The forest was really dense here, so although they sounded maybe 15 to 20 feet away, I couldn't see them or pinpoint exactly where they were. This time I could hear what they said. Guy 1, "It's fucked up, you guys always make me." Guy 2, in a hushed voice, "Shh. Someone's coming." Guy 1, now also hushed, "Shit." Guy 3, from a bit further to my left than the other guys, who sounded to be mostly right in front of me, "Hurry." Rustling noise. Guy 1, "Fuck." Guy 2, "SHH." I came around a corner and expected to see them, but I couldn't see anyone. I kept walking, cautious and trying to be aware of my surroundings. About 10 feet past the corner I saw something to the left of the trail, close to where the voices were coming from, that caught my eye. It was a bunch of stuff wrapped up in a big tarp. It wasn't completely wrapped up and you could kind of see into it. All I could see was something glass and I wanted to see what it was. I scanned the forest behind the tarp to make sure nobody was watching, and then stepped towards it. Suddenly, one of them says, "Keep walking," very calmly. I looked back into the forest but still couldn't see anyone. They said go, still calm. I looked for another second, still unable to see a soul, and then turned and kept walking like nothing happened. I don't know what was going on, but the whole thing gave me the creepiest vibe I've ever gotten. Went on a camping trip maybe 10 years ago, and in the middle of the night we heard this incredibly loud smack way out on the water. Water carries sound really well, so it woke us all right the fuck up. My first though was some drunk/deranged motherfucker with a gun was shooting out over the lake, and the sound was a bullet skimming off the surface. Turns out it was a beaver that smacked the shit out of the water before diving under. It happened again in the early morning and we laughed it off, but the notion of being out in the middle of nowhere with some homicidal prick taking pack shots at you creeped me out pretty good. Didn't happen while hunting, but when I was 12 I was looking for bottles in a creek on a dense forested hillside. Hear heavy footsteps behind me. They're slow and sound heavier than a human or even a buck. I almost get paralyzed when I turn around and see two holes on a rough leathery bump. A few seconds and a heart attack later, I realized it was just the neighbor's cow that got out and its nose was a few inches from my face. I spend a lot of time in the backcountry in the winter time. Usually it's just me and a friend. Most trails we do are popular in the summer, and totally dead once it starts to snow. Winter in 2014, we've hiked about 2 miles in and see this small black backpack in the middle of the trail. We hadn't seen any other cars at the trailhead or any people around, but this backpack hadn't been there long because there wasn't any snow on it. It had snowed the night before. It was a very odd sight. We figured if it was still on the trail when we looped around we'd pick it up. About 4 miles in and my friend and I are chatting away when I notice a large figure flailing in some trees up ahead. We go quiet and can hear this man rambling while he's pacing. At this point we are pretty freaked out and decide to turn around when we hear "Oh Hawaii" there, and this guy starts walking towards us. And then out pops another guy with a very pricey looking video camera. It turned out this flailing guy was actually a rapper and they were filming a music video for one of his new songs out in the forest. They had parked before the trailhead so we didn't notice their car. They ended up being super friendly and gave us a card, and we figured out it was their backpack we had seen on the trail a few miles before. We said our goodbyes and walked out. But hot damn, I was sure we were about to be killed in the woods. Edit, holy shit. Wow. So many people. So many things. I did not expect this. Also updated the year to 2014. I will try my hardest to find the rap video/artist. But as I've explained in the comments, my mind was a little stuck on wow, we're not being murdered right now, how nice, and it was 4 years ago. Edit 2, it was not the Migos video. But keep sending me other music videos that you think it might be, because I have no idea where to begin. We're gonna find this out together, guys. I missed this trip with my dad and his hunting buddy. They were in a remote section of southeastern Wyoming hunting for elk. Like any good elk hunter, they were up at 3:30 to stake out their spot and watch the herd patterns before daylight. As they were driving up to the spot, a figure appeared in their headlights, and by their silhouette, it wasn't a hunter. What was a person doing walking down the road in complete darkness with no hunting gear? My dad was driving, so he slowed to a crawl in his truck, and his buddy prepared his sidearm, as this had foul play written all over it. When they could distinguish the figure in the headlights, they saw it was a girl in a tank top and underwear, wearing no shoes on. They stopped and verbally checked her status out the window, as there could have easily been somebody staked out in the sagebrush, ready to ambush. When it was clear she was severely hypothermic and bleeding from her feet, they got out and let her in the truck cab. From there, it had to have been a terrifying experience for that girl. I sure wouldn't want 2 middle-aged rednecks picking me up 40 miles from any town. They cranked up the heat full blast and drove her to a nearby country gas station, where they were regular customers and friends with the owner and his wife, who was a retired nurse. When the girl could finally articulate her words, she told them that she and her boyfriend drove out there to drink and have sex. When she started having a seizure during sex, he lost his temper, grabbed her shoes, and threw them into the sage. When she got out of the car to find them, he peeled off, leaving her in near freezing temperatures in her skivvies. She estimated she walked about 4 miles on a dirt road before my dad found her. It's a good thing hunters start early because she easily could have died. Edit, thanks for the awesome response. My dad is a real great guy and a true Wyoming man. He seriously was more upset about getting to the elk spot late than anything else, haha. And to anybody doubting the veracity of the story or thinking I derived it from Wind River, we'll have to see it now. Thanks for the recommendation, that is totally fair. My dad could have made it up, maybe to cover up his disappointment in not getting the elk. But I doubt he would do that. My old man is a shit magnet and has all of the weirdest stories about bad shit happening around him, and I've seen some of it. Totally par for the course. And for an extra dose of the Weird West, let me introduce you to Monk King Bird Pottery. Edit 2, one more thought before bed. It's fair that this doesn't respond directly to the prompt, but think of it this way. You drive to your elk hunting spot, but arrive an hour later than usual and still bag your animal at sunrise. No second thoughts. A week later, you see in the newspaper that the remains of a 20-something woman were found in the brush along the road you drove down. Her time of death was within an hour or two of your arrival at the spot. That is the real horror of the situation, and I'm happy my dad isn't living with that. My dad's story, not mine. I had been walking for a couple hours, and I decided to sit under a tree for a while, just see what would happen. As I was relaxing, I noticed this light that kept flashing past my eyes. I looked over to where it was coming from, but I couldn't see what was there. Then I looked down and there was a red dot on my chest. Some asshole was using a laser sight and aiming at me. I yelled at him and started walking towards him, but he ran off. I went back to camp for the rest of the day. He didn't think someone was actually trying to shoot him, but if people aren't going to be safe with their rifles, he didn't want to be out there. Not a hunter, but a herper. I was looking for amphibians and reptiles with a few classmates at a local park during a herpetology class last summer, when we came across 2 little wooden teepees and a card table covered in animal bones. It looked like we walked right into the Blair Witch Project. Each of the structures had little altars that contained more bones in jars, plants, and other weird little trinkets. We got out of there fast and told the volunteer coordinator we were working with. We found out a while later that apparently, some homeschooled kids nearby liked to play in the woods and they had most likely collected the things we saw. I understand making forts in the woods, but the structures these kids made were freaky AF.